Thursday, May 26, 2022, Thomas Stonewall Jackson Tom, or Stone to his friends and family, looked forward to the upcoming weekend as he drove home that afternoon from work. Monday was Memorial Day, but he and Janice, his wife of 5 years, had been invited to spend a 4-day weekend at the country estate of her boss, Darren Hansen, a senior partner with the Remington Law Group, where Janice worked as a paralegal. Stone already had Monday off, so he took a vacation day to cover Friday. His boss, who also happened to be his father, was kind enough to let him go early on Thursday so he could get packed and hit the road. The drive to Darren's estate would easily take 3 hours, given freeway traffic and the nature of the narrow winding roads leading to Darren's estate. Being the concerned, loving husband, Stone reached out to Janice, hoping to help her overcome whatever bothered her. But she would simply shrug him off, telling him she would deal with it herself. She told him they had been invited to her boss' country estate for the weekend to celebrate her promotion. Promotion? Tom asked, confused. You never said anything about a promotion. How long has this been in the works? A couple of months now, Janice told him. I'm sorry, I should have told you before. Is that why you've been so short with me lately? I guess so. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to be so distant with you. I've had a lot on my mind lately, she replied contritely. Tom smiled as he wrapped her in his arms and felt saddened when she flinched slightly. I can imagine, he said, and to think I was worried that you might be having an affair. He felt her tense up slightly, but then she relaxed. Of course not, Janice said. I would never do something like that to you. He heard the words, but something in her tone didn't sound convincing. I'm glad to hear that. Oh, Tom forced himself to respond through his growing uneasiness. 'Cause you know that's the one thing I simply wouldn't tolerate. I know, Janice said quietly. So, do you think you can get the Friday before off? 4 days in the country would do us both a lot of good. Sure. I have plenty of vacation time. We can leave Thursday after I get off work if you want. That would be wonderful. I'll let Darren know and have everything packed by the time you get home, she said. I promise it will be a weekend you'll never forget. Stone thought about those words as he filled the gas tank on his new Ford F-150 four-wheel drive pickup. A weekend he would never forget. He could only hope she meant that in a good way. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and headed into the house. True to her word, Janice had everything packed and ready to be loaded into the truck. He checked his bags, verifying that his stuff was packed and ready to go. He was impressed that Janice had even packed his toiletries in his overnight bag. Then he took in the other bags. You have enough stuff here for a week. He joked when she came into the room wearing cutoffs and a t-shirt. I thought we were just going to the country for the weekend. You know I like to be prepared, she joked. Why don't you get that stuff loaded up and I'll finish up here. He saw that she had sandwich stuff on the counter and was packing a picnic basket with snacks and drinks for the ride out, as she used to do when they took day trips over the weekend. Sounds good, he said with a smile. Maybe this would be a good weekend after all, he thought. He loaded everything into the truck, helped Janice finish packing the food, locked the house, and set off for what he ardently hoped would be a good weekend in the country. This weekend is going to be the best ever, Janice said enthusiastically as Tom drove. Trust me, you'll have a great time. I'm looking forward to that, Tom replied, hoping she meant it. It took longer than Tom planned to get out of the city, thanks to an accident on the freeway that brought traffic to a screeching halt. As a result, they were running almost 2 hours behind schedule. But that didn't affect Janice's cheerful mood, which pleased Tom. He filled the gas tank up once more when he reached the road that would take them to Darren's estate, then followed the windy road through the hilly wooded terrain. It was well after dark when they reached the gate leading to Darren's sizable 2-story home. Janice had been given the code for the gate, and soon they pulled up to the sprawling brick mansion. This is one big house, Tom exclaimed. 3 men in dark suits and sunglasses approached the truck as Tom turned the engine off. Tom wondered, why would they need sunglasses in the dark? I can get our luggage, Tom said as he opened the back door of the pickup. Thanks anyway, no sir. That's our job, one of the men said in a serious voice. Another man held his hand out. Keys, sir? I need to park your vehicle, the other man said. Please do as they ask, sweetheart, Janice suggested in a tone that made it clear he should obey these men. He looked at the man asking for the keys and saw the bulge in his jacket that indicated he was armed. Sure, Tom said darkly, handing his keys to the second man as the other 2 men grabbed their luggage unceremoniously and walked away without a word. Thank you, the man said mechanically. Tom watched as the men effortlessly carried the heavy bags up the steps. Are you coming? Janice asked. Yeah, sure. On my way. Tom followed Janice and the two men up the stairs, wondering why they would need to be armed. Something about this just didn't seem right. Ah, there you are. I trust you had a safe trip. A tall man with dark curly hair boomed when they entered. Tom recognized the man as Darren Hansen. He had met Darren a few times at company holiday events. As Tom watched, Janice and the man exchanged hugs. Then he turned to Thomas. It's good to meet you again. I'm Darren Hansen, he announced, extending a hand. Welcome to my humble abode. Thank you. A pleasure meeting you again, Mr. Hansen, Tom said, accepting Darren's hand. No need to be so formal, Tom. May I call you Tom? I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of each other, Darren said with a slight smile. Especially now that your wife is moving up in the firm. Of course, Tom said. I'm sorry we're running late. There was an accident on the freeway, Janice explained. So I heard, Darren said. I am glad you made it safely. Are the others here? Janice asked. Others? Tom wasn't aware others would be here. Yes, they're all here. Unfortunately, they decided to turn in for the evening. Wanted to get well rested before the festivities begin tomorrow, Darren replied. The man who took Tom's keys returned through the front door, handing the keys back to Tom. Thank you, Tom said, putting the keys in his pocket. By now, the two men who took their luggage had returned from the second floor. Harold, escort the Jacksons to their room, if you would, Darren commanded. Yes, sir, one of the big men said. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning, Darren said. Sleep well. Thank you, Janice said quietly, her eyes downcast modestly. Tom noticed, but didn't say anything. He simply filed it in the back of his mind. Maybe Dad was right, he thought. This way, please, Harold commanded in a deep, gravelly voice. Tom and Janice followed the man up the spiral staircase and down 2 hallways before stopping at a locked door. He pulled out a card key and held it before a reader, and Tom heard the door lock open. Harold opened the door and motioned for them to enter the room. Oh wow, Janice gasped when they walked inside. The room was spacious and well appointed. It even had its own bathroom with a double vanity and a large television monitor on the wall opposite the king-sized bed. A gas fireplace took up most of one wall. This is very nice, Tom said with forced cheerfulness as he looked around. I'm glad you like it, Harold said. He pulled out 2 card keys, one of which he handed to Janice and the other to Tom. These are your keys to the room. Keep them with you at all times, please. Breakfast will be served at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Good night, Janice replied as Harold left the room, closing the door. This is a very nice room, Tom said as he walked around, taking inventory of the room. Yes, it is, Janice agreed as Tom began hanging his clothes in the closet. Janice put her things away, but Tom noticed she simply hung her garment bag in the closet, not taking her clothes out first. So who are these other people Darren mentioned? He asked. Oh, just some important people from the firm, Janice replied, not looking at him. And this new position, what is it exactly? Tom followed up. I'm Darren's new executive assistant, Janice told him. The position comes with a good increase in pay. But I will have to travel from time to time. Are you okay with that? As long as it doesn't get in the way of our lives, Tom said. We've talked about starting a family, you know, I know. But I might have to put that on hold for a while, Janice quietly said. At least until I get settled in my new position. How long are we talking about? Tom asked. I'm not sure. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a little longer. Are you okay with that? She asked. I understand that this job means a lot to you, Tom replied neutrally, wondering what exactly this position entailed and knowing that they weren't getting any younger. You have no idea, Janice told him. This is a big step for me. All I'm asking for is some time and a little patience. Sounds fair, Tom said, embracing his wife. You know, I'm really proud of you, right? Really? Janice asked in a soft voice. Of course, he responded, hugging her. I love you, Janice. Never forget that. I love you too, Stone, she replied. After climbing into bed and turning off the lights, Tom reached for Janice, but she appeared to be asleep with her eyes closed. He sighed, as this had been her pattern for the past 2 months. He turned to his side and fell asleep, feeling frustrated. The sky was a clear, deep blue, with not even a hint of a cloud. The sun was shining brightly, and a gentle breeze blew from the south. Suddenly, the sky grew dark and filled with large, threatening clouds. The gentle breeze transformed into a strong wind that grew stronger with each passing moment. A deep rumble could be heard as the sky darkened and the clouds gathered. A brief flash of lightning could be seen in the distance as the storm. Clouds grew, and the wind intensified. A sudden flash of lightning struck the ground close to his feet. When he looked down, he saw a beating heart pumping blood onto the ground. Tom had experienced this dream many times before, except for the beating heart. And every time he had this dream, someone close to him passed away within the next 72 hours. The last time was 3 years ago. 2 days later, his older brother Andrew was hit by a drunk driver and killed instantly. A year before that, his mother had a stroke just 12 hours after his dream, and she passed away 24 hours later, never waking up. Tom sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. He looked at the digital clock on his nightstand and saw that it was 4:15 a.m. Even though it was extremely early, Tom knew he had to reach out to his father. Grabbing his phone from the nightstand, Tom noticed that he had no signal. He got out of bed carefully, trying not to wake Janice. He put on his pants and a t-shirt, then slipped on his shoes. Taking his card key, he opened the door and spotted one of Darren's armed security guards at a small desk in the hallway. The man in the dark suit and sunglasses looked up when Tom opened the door. "Is there something wrong, mister?" "Jackson?" the large man asked. "I need to use a phone, and there's no cell service here," Tom said. "Who do you need to call?" "I need to call my father." "It's important," Tom told him. "Follow me, sir," the man said as he stood up. Tom followed him to a smaller room off the hallway. "You can use that phone," he said, pointing to a phone on a small table next to a chair. "Just dial 9 for an outside line first." "Thank you," Tom said, sitting down in the chair. He started dialing his father's number and noticed the man standing in the doorway. "Can I have some privacy, please?" "Of course," the guard said, turning away from the door. Tom couldn't believe the audacity of the man. And why was he armed? He finished dialing the number and waited. His father picked up after the third ring. "Hello?" "Who's calling?" his father asked. Tom could tell the older man had just been woken up. "Hi, Dad. It's me, Tom. Sorry for calling so early. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I was having a nice dream, reminiscing about your mother, but I'm all right, Tom." "Did you have another one of your dreams?" "Yeah," Tom said quietly. He could hear the other man's sigh on the other end. "Same as the one before Andy's accident?" his father asked. "Exactly the same," Tom said. "I see. Thanks for letting me know, son. I'm doing fine, but I'll be extra cautious. Why don't you go back to sleep, all right?" "I will, Dad. I just wanted to give you a heads up," Tom told him. "I appreciate that, son. I'm okay, though. I promise." "You're stuck with me for a while longer," his father reassured him. "Remember what I told you and watch your back." They ended the call, and Tom walked back to his room. "Everything okay?" the guard asked. "Yeah, everything's fine. Thanks," Tom said before opening the door to his room. He undressed and climbed back into bed, and Janice groaned as she rolled over to face him. "Where did you go? Is everything all right?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, everything's fine. I needed to call Dad," Tom said. "Oh," she groaned before rolling back onto her side. From her breathing, Tom could tell she had fallen back asleep. He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come for another hour, as he couldn't stop thinking about the unsettling dream. Tom got out of bed at 6 a.m. and went to the bathroom to start his morning routine. Afterward, he took a quick shower, then changed into a fresh pair of jeans and a polo shirt. Janice followed him into the bathroom after opening the blinds. Standing at the nightstand, Tom gathered his watch and wallet and looked out the window. He noticed the wrought iron bars attached to the outside of the window and wondered why they were there. There was no balcony, and the concrete driveway extended at least 25 feet below. Looking outside, Tom saw a helicopter sitting on a pad about 50 yards from the house. He hadn't seen it before, but it was already dark when they arrived the night before. He also noticed guards carrying what looked like rifles slung over their shoulders. Tom couldn't help but wonder, was Darren expecting trouble? "Are you ready for breakfast, sweetheart?" Janice asked as she stepped out of the bathroom. "As ready as I'll ever be," Tom said, fastening his wristwatch. "What happened last night?" she inquired. "Another dream," Tom said. "You mean like before your brother passed away?" "Yeah, exactly the same. I called Dad to make sure he was all right." "How was he?" she asked. "He's fine. I caught him in the middle of a dream," I see. Janice chuckled in a way he found slightly unsettling as she finished getting dressed. "Let's go downstairs and have some breakfast. I'm starving." "Oh, and don't forget your walking stick," she reminded Tom. The walking stick was a gift from his father, given to Tom after he was discharged from the hospital years ago. During his service in Iraq, the vehicle he was in was hit by an enemy RPG. 2 other Marines in the vehicle were instantly killed, while Tom and another Marine managed to escape. Though severely injured, They found cover and defended themselves until help arrived. Tom underwent months of surgery and rehabilitation and eventually received a medical discharge. Fortunately, the doctors were able to save Tom's leg but had to replace his left hip. The rehabilitation helped Tom regain his ability to walk, and the walking stick provided significant support. Even though he could walk fine now, he still experienced pain after prolonged walking, so he continued to use the walking stick his father had given him. They arrived at Darren's table to find 3 other men and a woman waiting for them. Tom had briefly met the men before and knew they were executives at Darren's law firm, although he couldn't recall their names. He had never seen or met the woman before. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce my husband, Thomas Stonewall Jackson," Janice announced. Tom shook hands with the others. "Stonewall, huh? That's a rather unique name," commented Glenn Oldman, one of the firm's executives. "My parents were big fans of the Grand Ole Opry back in the day, so they named me after a favorite country and Western singer from the 50s and 60s, Tom replied. "My dad used to joke that it was either that or Michael Stonewall Jackson." "Yeah, I remember that name," Glenn said with a smile. "He passed away about 10 years ago, right?" "That's what I heard," Tom replied. The woman smiled as Tom accepted her hand. "It's good to finally meet you, Mr. Jackson. I've heard a lot about you. I'm Eve Carson," she said. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Carson. Please call me Tom. I hope you've heard at least a few good things." "So what do you do for the firm?" Tom asked. "I'm in charge of training and recruiting," Eve told him. "And please, feel free to call me Eve. I have heard a lot of good things, and I have a feeling we'll be spending a lot of time together this weekend." "Oh?" Tom asked. "Why is that with Janice's new position? There's going to be a lot of changes in your life," Darren stated before Eve could respond. "She's here to help you." "Adjust? Adjust? And why would I need to adjust to my wife's promotion?" Tom asked, more than a little concerned. He looked at Janice for an explanation, but none was forthcoming. "It's complicated," Darren stated bluntly. "Let's eat breakfast first, shall we? Maybe we can get to know each other a little before we get into the meat of things." They sat down as Darren's employees wheeled carts into the room. As Tom watched, they placed dishes in front of everyone piled with eggs, bacon, toast, and fruit. Another employee walked around the table, pouring coffee into their cups. Tom also took stock of the armed security men who took stations on either side of the door. "So Tom, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?" Rick Harmon, another executive, asked. "Janice says you were some kind of soldier or something." Tom glanced at Janice before answering. He had told her a little about his service, but it went over her head. As far as she was concerned, everyone who wore a green uniform was in the Army. "I was in the military, but I was never a soldier," Tom replied before taking a bite of his scrambled eggs, which he found delicious. "Oh? What were you then?" Rick asked, glancing at Janice. "I was in the Marines," Tom answered. "Thank you for your service," Darren said. "What did you do in the Marines, if you don't mind my asking?" "Not at all," Tom said. "I was a scout sniper." "Assigned to a force reconnaissance unit when I was wounded scout sniper, huh?" mused Ryan Jones, the third executive at the table. "So, basically you took out bad guys." Right, Tom saw the glances between the other executives and the security men before replying. "I suppose that's one way of putting it," Tom said. The glances became expressions of concern, and Tom wondered what was happening here. 32 enemy soldiers didn't finish their missions, he added lightly, but in a tone like a rattlesnake giving fair warning. "I haven't had to eliminate anyone in several years, though." The military part of his mind chided himself. Had he betrayed his position or warned them off? "Interesting you never told us this, Janice," Darren said with a slight tightness in his voice, looking at Tom's wife, who flushed slightly. "It's not Janice's fault," Tom said before Janice could speak. "I never told her exactly what I did in the service, partly because some of it is still classified, and partly because that's a period of my life I'd much rather forget. But now you're an accountant, is that right?" Rick asked hurriedly, breaking in to divert the tension that had suddenly rolled over the table like an overcast day. "Yes, I was discharged after my rehab and went to college to finish my business degree. That's where I met Janice. I'm now a forensic accountant working for my father," Tom said. "What does your father do?" Glenn asked. "He runs Jackson Specialty Investigations. Works primarily for corporations," Tom said. "I've heard of them," Rick said thoughtfully. "They do good work from what I've heard." They finished their breakfast, engaging mostly in small talk. But that didn't help Tom, who had a very uncomfortable feeling about all of this. He had learned to pay close attention to his instincts on the battlefield, as they had kept him alive more than once. "Well, it looks like a beautiful day outside. Eve, why don't you take Tom for a tour around the property while we go out back?" Darren asked. Of course, Eve replied. Tom looked at Janice and tried to gauge her thoughts but couldn't. She had an expression he would hate to play poker against. "Go ahead, sweetheart. It'll be okay," she said encouragingly, but a little stiffly. "Yeah, okay," Tom said. He was uncomfortable with the situation but felt he couldn't do much now. So he acquiesced to Darren and Janice. Intelligence and reconnaissance, reconnaissance and intelligence, he told himself. Grabbing his walking stick, he looked at Eve. "Are you ready, Tom?" she asked with a brightness he knew was phony. "Sure," Tom replied, hoping the churning in his gut would settle down. "After you." Janice put a hand on his arm before he left, and he stopped and looked at her. "Just remember that I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Tom said. He leaned in to hug her, but she turned around. Shocked and humiliated, Tom backed off and walked away, not saying anything until he and Eve were far from the main house. Tom couldn't help but notice the heavily armed security men not far away from them. With Eve's back to him, Tom pulled his phone out and activated the voice record app while observing that he somehow had 2 bars a weak signal, but enough to make a call, then replaced it in his pocket. "It's so beautiful out here," Eve finally said to break the ice. Yet Tom replied in a non-committal tone. They reached a wooden park bench overlooking a small pond and stopped. Eve sat down, so Tom followed her lead. "What's going on here?" he asked. "You're a smart man, Tom. Why don't you figure it out?" she asked in response. "I've got an idea, but it's too horrifying to contemplate," Tom answered. "Why don't you just come clean and tell me?" "All right. As you know, Janice has been picked to be Darren's next executive assistant," Eve began. "Yes, I already know that. Janice told me that much. But there's more, isn't there?" "Yes, there is," Eve said. "Your life is about to change, Tom. Whether it's for the better will depend on how you react. You know Janice loves you, don't you? I've heard her say so. But frankly, I'm having a hard time believing it right now. Trust me. She does love you. And she wants the best for the two of you. That's why she's willing to do whatever is necessary to guarantee your future," Eve lectured. "You do support your wife in her career goals, don't you?" "Of course, I always have," Tom said. He felt like he had one night years ago, worming his way slowly across the ground, probing the sand for mines under a high-tech heat-dispersing cape. "I'm glad to hear you say that. Then you should understand that the next year or two will only be a minor blip, a bump in the road of a long, happy marriage." "A year or two?" She mentioned 6 months. "Why are you saying that? What's going to happen over the next 2 years?" Tom asked pointedly. "And what, exactly, is your role in all of this?" "I'll get to that. My role is to prepare you for what will happen, and to make sure you fully understand and embrace Darren's expectations. For you and your wife, why should I care about Darren's expectations of me? I don't answer to him, and he doesn't sign my paycheck," Tom snarled, his patience growing thin. "No, he doesn't, but he does sign hers. And your compliance will go a long way toward making Janice's job easier," Eve explained. "Compliance? What the heck are you talking about? I'm sure you've noticed that Darren is what most people would call an alpha male," Eve stated, as though it was as obvious as a giant flashing red neon sign. "In other words, he's a self-absorbed, arrogant jerk," Tom growled. Eve chuckled at that, the first genuine sound she had made, and the first he believed. "Let's just say he expects people to fall in line, do as they're expected. That includes Janice. And by extension, you, in other words, he wants to control my wife. Isn't that what you're telling me?" His temperature is rising, but for now, firmly controlled. "I wouldn't quite use that terminology, but essentially, yes, in fact, they've already been close." Several times, Eve said, noticing the pained look on Tom's face. "And you know this. How?" Tom asked. "I was there. I recorded it," Eve said in an even tone, as though recording 2 people being close was the most natural thing one could do. "Would you like to see some of the clips? You're kidding, right?" "Not at all, Tom. Here, take a look. You might find them interesting," Eve said, handing Tom her phone. He looked at the short video clips of Janice and Darren getting close. "They are interesting. Mind if I keep a copy?" Tom asked. It would come in handy for his divorce, he thought. "Not at all. I saved those clips especially for you." Using the phone's Bluetooth capability, Tom saved copies to his phone. "Tell me something, Tom. How has your love life been lately? Not that it's any of your business, but it's been practically non-existent for the last couple of months." "Why? Actually, it is my business." And the reason is simple. What? And she just went along with it. Tom growled between clenched teeth, his anger growing. Of course. He is her boss now. She answers to him, just as all of his previous assistants answered to him. And he will expect you to answer to him as well. Tom cringed at the idea of obeying someone else so powerfully. He can expect in one hand and wish in the other see which one fills up first. Tom snapped through gritted teeth. He noticed the smirk on her face and felt like wiping it off with the back of his hand. So what does the jerk expect from me? Money. Not even close, Eve chuckled. He expects your obedience, your submission, and he will expect you to publicly display that tonight before the other senior partners. What do you mean? What does he expect me to do? The dynamics of your marriage will change drastically while Janice is in her current position. To show that change, Darren has documents he needs you to sign. These documents state that you willingly give up your marriage rights, property, and assets to him while Janice is his assistant. Let me make sure I understand what you just said. Your jerk of a boss wants me to sign everything over? Are you kidding me? Tom growled, anger in his eyes. Once you have given yourself to him, he will take Janice. They will leave for New York City early tomorrow morning for the weekend. And where will I be while they enjoy themselves in New York? Tom asked. You will stay here, confined to your room. You will be taken care of. When they return, you will drive Janice back home. You will follow her instructions without question, Eve replied. So, if I understand correctly, I'm supposed to give myself to him, perform certain acts on him, and then be kept prisoner here against my will. And what do I get out of all of this? If you comply with Darren's plan, you will escape relatively unharmed, aside from some minor humiliation. And when he's done with Janice, you will be well compensated. And I suppose you, Darren, and my soon-to-be ex-wife plan to ruin my marriage, take my work, and violate me. Is that right? I wouldn't put it exactly like that, but I suppose from your perspective, yes. We worked together on this, Eve said in a neutral tone. Did he do this with his previous assistants? Tom asked. Yes, Eve said. And they went along with all of this. They did, Eve told him. In fact, the husbands enjoyed it a lot. What harm would it do? I'm sure she would. They can both forget about it, Tom hissed. And you can tell Darren that if he dares to make a move on me, I'll do everything in my power to make sure it's the last thing he ever does. I understand you're angry, Tom. And you have every right to be. But you could benefit in the end, in more ways than one. But there's more. More? Tom asked, shocked. And if I refuse to go along with this nonsense? Let's just say you wouldn't like the consequences, Eve stated. A few people tried to resist Darren and ended up broke and convicted of serious offenses. They were even found with inappropriate material involving children on their devices. You might know what happens to people like that in prison. It's not a pleasant existence. That sounds like a threat. Tom replied. Call it what you want. All right. I will, Tom said as he took out his phone. He paused for a moment, saved an audio recording, and scrolled through his contacts until he found the one he needed. Making sure he had a signal, he selected the number and held the phone to his ear. What are you doing? Eve asked, her face turning red with anger. Tom smiled and put a finger to his lips, signaling for her to stay quiet. Sheriff Jackson, the person on the other end, said when they answered Tom's call. Uncle Bob, how are you doing? Tom asked. Stone. What's going on? Dad was right. I need help getting out of a dangerous situation. You got the address? I have it, son. I also have the coordinates from your phone. What's the situation? I counted at least 15 heavily armed men. There's a gate at the entrance. The code is 6,973, unless they changed it since last night. Hansen and 3 of his executives are here, along with his trainer. She just gave me all the information. I have it all recorded. I'll send it to you, Tom said. Copy that, Bob replied. We're on our way. Edited to add is approximately 5 minutes. Can you hold on until then? I think so, Uncle Bob, as long as you're willing to call it self-defense, Tom said, and thank you. My pleasure. I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to my favorite nephew. What about Janice? According to Hansen's trainer, she's involved and already loyal to Hansen, Tom said. I'm sorry to hear that, son, Bob said sadly. Yeah, me too, Tom said. Well, hang in there, young man. We'll be there soon. With that, Tom ended the call and sent the audio file to his uncle. What did you just do? A frightened Eve asked after Tom put his phone away. Who did you call? I called for backup, Tom replied with a smile. I need to go back to the house and warn the others, Eve stammered. starting to stand up, clearly disoriented by the turn of events. Tom shook his head and gently pulled her back down onto the bench. She stared at his determined expression in shocked fascination. "I don't think so. Let's sit here and enjoy the sunshine for a few minutes." "It might be the last bit of sunshine you see for a while," Tom said, allowing himself a satisfied smile. "I think you might have underestimated your opponent this time," Darren Ryan said after Janice and the four men settled down beside the large pool at Darren's house. "Why?" "Because Janice's husband is a former Marine." "So what?" Darren scoffed. "What can he do anyway? He's alone, unarmed, and surrounded by a small army of armed security. If he refuses Eve's offer, then we move to plan B. Just be cautious," Rick advised. "Don't worry," Darren said. "I have everything under control. We'll drug his drinks tonight, and when the time comes, he'll happily perform that act on me." "I can't wait to witness that," Janice cooed. "Will you make him swallow like you made the others?" "Of course," Darren said. "By the time this weekend is over, your weak husband will be begging for it," he added, causing Janice to giggle like a schoolgirl. "Just don't push him too far," Ryan cautioned. "He's not like the others. They were easily manipulated. He's different. They're all the same," Darren sneered. "No, they're not. This guy is a combat Marine, trained to protect. You need to be prepared for anything." "Don't worry, Ryan. I've got this under control," Darren scolded. "But I am curious about something. Why didn't you know about your husband's military service, Janice?" "Well, it's like Tom said. He never shared the details with me," Janice replied. "All he would say is that he was in the military." "Doesn't matter," Darren snorted. "He's going down tonight, and your career will take off." "What if he files for divorce?" Janice asked. "Then I'll ruin him, just like I did with the others. He'll end up in jail for serious crimes." "Don't worry, dear. I'll take care of him." "What's that noise?" Glenn asked, looking around. Everyone fell silent and listened. The distinct sound of helicopters filled the air. Suddenly, one of Darren's security personnel rushed to the pool. "We have a problem, mister Hansen," he panted. "What is it?" Darren asked. They heard shouting and the sounds of a struggle. Then they saw two uniformed deputies in protective gear approach the pool, their rifles ready. "Stop right there," one of the deputies ordered. "Drop your weapon." The deputy instructed Darren's security personnel, who immediately complied, not wanting to get shot. Additional deputies rushed in, handcuffing Janice, Darren, and the other three men. "What is happening?" Darren demanded. "I will make sure you lose your jobs for this." "Be quiet." "You are all under arrest," a deputy stated, reciting a long list of charges. He finished by reading them their Miranda rights. The deputies escorted all 5 detainees around the building, where they saw 4 helicopters, a bus, and 3 large vans. Officers were everywhere, guiding the disarmed security personnel onto the bus. Janice spotted Tom standing next to a tall man in a khaki uniform. "Tom, what's going on?" she exclaimed. Tom and the tall man approached her. "Your little party is over," Tom said calmly. "Sorry, I forgot my manners. Janice, this is Sheriff Robert Jackson. Remember my Uncle Bob?" "Uncle Bob?" Janice gasped weakly. "I didn't know you were a sheriff. I must have slipped my mind," Bob said with a smirk. "Tom, please. This is all a misunderstanding. You have to believe me," Janice pleaded desperately. "No, Janice. I don't have to believe you. Actually, I don't think I've ever been more shocked and disappointed in my life. I'll be seeing my lawyer soon to start the divorce process. From now on, you're dead to me," Tom said. "Understand? Dead." With that, Tom took her left hand and removed her rings, placing them in his pocket. "You jerk," Darren snarled as he unsuccessfully tried to jerk free of the 2 deputies holding him. "I'll be out of jail in no time. And then I'm going to make you regret this. You hear me, you horrible person? That sounds like a threatening statement. What do you think, Uncle Bob?" Tom asked with a smirk that triumphed all of Darren's previous condescension by a wide mark. "Sure sounded like one to me as well," Bob said. "We'll just add that to all the other charges against him. And it'll help make sure he never gets bail. Don't worry, Mr. Hansen. My boys will take good care of you," he chuckled. "And your associates. Get these people out of here," he ordered the deputies, who instantly complied. Tom and Bob watched as the wrongdoers were loaded into the bus. Tom felt like the last several years of his life were a lie. He loved Janice from the moment they met, and Bob slapped him on the shoulder. "It'll get better, son. Trust me on that," he said. Bob had been through a divorce from a cheating spouse years ago and knew the pain Tom felt. "Thanks, Uncle Bob, for everything." "You're welcome, son. If you need anything, give me a call. And tell your dad I said hello. I think he has a bottle of his best waiting for your visit." "I will. Is it safe for me to get my things? I need to get out of here." "Sure. I think they're just about finished up inside the place anyway," Bob told him. After they said their goodbyes, Tom packed his things and went home. 1 week later, after discussing with his father, Tom saw the family attorney and had divorce papers drawn up according to the prenuptial they had signed before the marriage. He waited until they were served before visiting Janice in the county jail. "This will be the one and only time I visit you, Janice," he said when she took her seat. "I legally need to make sure you got the papers." "I got them," Janice said quietly. "I've already signed them and sent them back." "Good. As I'm sure you could tell, I followed the prenuptial. I'll wait until after your trial to get rid of your things." "I appreciate that," Janice said. "I don't understand something." "How did you know?" "You'll hear the details in court, so I'll give you the condensed version. I suspected something was happening for a couple of months before that weekend, but I didn't have any proof. About 4 months before that Memorial Day, the estranged husband of one of Darren's so-called assistants approached Dad with a pretty wild story. He also brought some spreadsheets and documents he said his estranged wife got from Darren's system. Dad had me look over the spreadsheets to see what I could find. Naturally, I couldn't say anything to you, privilege and conflict of interest and all that stuff. It took some time, but we finally found what we were looking for: evidence of all kinds of shady financial dealings with some rather sketchy people. Your lover did an excellent job hiding them, but not well enough. A couple of weeks before that weekend, Dad turned what he had over to the feds, who were highly interested in Hanson's dealings. In fact, they were set to raid your offices sometime in June. Dad said I needed to be very careful that weekend. He relayed what his contact told him, even though he found it very difficult to believe. We spoke with my Uncle Bob, who, as you know, is the county sheriff where Darren's property is located. I had hoped nothing would happen. But that's not how it worked. "I do have a few questions for you, though. What do you want to know?" Janice asked. "How long before that weekend were you involved with your so-called master?" "About 2 months," Janice replied. Tom was surprised that she was so candid. "That's about the time things fell apart between us." "Did he tell you to cut me off?" "Yes," she said quietly, her face turning red. "I guess I should get tested for infections then," Tom said, causing Janice even more embarrassment. "Did you really want to see me perform a certain act on your lover?" Janice looked down, refusing to meet her husband's gaze. "Well?" he pressed angrily. She looked back up at him with tears in her eyes. Again, "Yes," she said, "surely you knew I would never willingly agree to do that." "I would rather die first." "So why?" "Because I was so infatuated with Darren that I would have gone along with anything he wanted. You don't understand. He liked the feeling of having power over everyone around him. And if I didn't comply, he had what he called a backup plan," Janice admitted. "You mean the drugs?" "Yes, they found the vial with the chemical he intended to use on me. I had nothing to do with that," Janice claimed. No. "I never wanted to hurt you," she sobbed. "The evidence says otherwise, Janice. You not only cheated on me, you plotted and schemed with your so-called master to ruin me as a person. So, there's no way back?" "No, none. No forgiveness. Nothing. Like I told you that day, you are dead to me." Tom hissed as Janice shed hot tears but didn't flinch. "I've wasted enough time on you. Goodbye, Janice. Enjoy what's left of your sad life." With that, he stood and walked away, immune to her tears. Epilogue: after several court appearances, Janice, Darren, Eve, and the others were found guilty of all the charges against them. As the ringmaster, Darren received a life sentence in federal prison, meaning he would never be paroled. Having played a minor role in Darren's illegal financial schemes, the 3 executives were sentenced to 20 years. For their parts in Darren's schemes, Eve and Janice were given somewhat lighter sentences. Several others in the firm were charged for their roles in the conspiracy. A few turned state's evidence against Darren and were given immunity as part of a plea deal. By the time the smoke cleared, the Remington Law Group no longer existed. Tom's divorce from Janice went through quickly and without a problem. Due to Janice's prison sentence, Tom packaged up all of her possessions and placed them in storage for her parents to collect at their convenience. On July 4th, Tom, his father, and Bob celebrated Independence Day, as did the rest of the nation with a barbecue and fireworks. Bob brought a guest to the festivities and introduced her to Tom. He was instantly taken by the attractive, shapely, brown-eyed brunette in front of him and had a hard time not staring at her well-toned legs, set off by a pair of short denim cutoffs. "Son, this is Marcia Simmons. She just moved here from Dallas and started up with me a couple weeks ago." "You're a deputy?" Tom asked. "Sure am," Marcia said with a confident smile that lit her face. "She's also a former Marine," Bob said. "An MP, like your dad. Marcia, my nephew here, was also in the Corps. A sniper with Force Recon. Semper Fi," Marcia said. "Wow," Tom replied. "I think we're going to get along just fine," Tom said with a huge smile. "I think so too," Marcia agreed. "Get me a soda?" "Sure," Tom replied. "I could use a refreshing drink myself." He grabbed 2 sodas from his father's ice chest and handed one to her. "Your uncle told me about your last mission." "Sounds perfectly executed," Marcia said when they sat down. "I'm sorry about what you went through with your ex." "Yeah, well, I guess it happens," Tom remarked quietly. "The divorce will be final soon." "How about you? I saw the mark on your ring finger. Were you married as well?" "I was," Marcia said. "Apparently my husband wasn't, if you know what I mean. I came home early one night and found him in bed with his coworker. In my bed, no less." "I'm sorry to hear that." "If you ask me, he was silly and foolish," Tom told her as he admired her appearance. "I agree," Marcia said. "I'm just glad we didn't have any children." "Do you have kids?" "No, thankfully. We were talking about starting a family, then everything went downhill." Tom and Marcia talked for a long time and had a great time when Bob and Tom's father set off the fireworks. By the end of the evening, Tom felt much better. At the very least, he believed he had met a kindred spirit in Marcia. "Are you about ready to head back, man?" Marcia Bob asked after they finished the fireworks display. "I guess it is about that time," she remarked before turning to Tom. "I had a wonderful time, Tom. It was a real pleasure meeting you." "I had a wonderful time as well, Marcia. And I'm very glad I got to meet you. In fact, I'd like to see you again, if that's all right." "That would be more than all right, Tom," she said, a big smile on her face. "Here's my number," she added, handing him a card with her cell number. "Your uncle keeps me busy, but I'm usually off Saturday nights. Give me a call." "Will do," Tom said, returning her smile. He took her card, noticing the wink and smile from his uncle. "I'll call you this Thursday, talk to you," then Marcia said before giving him a friendly hug. They said their goodbyes and left. "Nice-looking young lady," Tom's father said after they left. "Yes, very nice," Tom said with a huge grin. "I hope you intend to keep your promise to her," the older man said. "Absolutely," Tom said. "Good man," his father said, patting Tom on the back. "Simon, help me clean up, and let's see if we can finish the rest of that soda. Are you going to give me the day off tomorrow to sleep it off?" Tom asked. "No way," his father replied with a laugh. Laughing along, Tom joined his father, his mind on a sweet brunette with the most attractive legs he had seen in quite some time.